The human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, attacks the body's immune system. If left untreated, the disease progresses to its most severe stage, AIDS. HIV is an enveloped virus containing two identical strands of positive sense linear RNA, along with several enzymes. Transmission can occur following exposure to infected blood and other bodily fluids. Once inside a person's body, the HIV virus infects specific cells in the immune system, called CD4 T cells, which is then forced to produce many new copies of HIV.
But what if everything that we think we know about AIDS actually isn't true? There's an organization called Rethinking AIDS, and they say that there are over 2,000 scientists, and they list their names on their website. Scientists, professionals, academics that are on record as questioning the very theory that HIV causes AIDS. Now, we often associate this movement, and it is a movement, with a biologist at the University of California, Berkeley, Peter Duesberg, because he was not the first, but among the first, and certainly the most credible, and certainly the most visible scientist to question the link between HIV and AIDS.
Science in this country and science in the world used to be democratic. All voices could be heard to find the truth. In particular, if we don't have the truth, if a hypothesis is as totally bankrupt as the virus hypothesis that hasn't saved one single life, we are killing 180,000 people with AZT.
Mr. Woodruff.
Can you get me AZT? The next Industries, they just released it for testing. Oh, and I want to buy some. Now.
That isn't how it works. For about a year, a group of patients gets either the drug or a placebo. It's totally left up to chance. Not even doctors are allowed to know.
So you can die in people's sugar pills?
It's the only way to know if a drug works.
Can you get some for me? I got cash. I can go a month, a week, however you want to do it.
I hear you. Unfortunately, no. But when the drug is proven to work, and if you fit the profile, then yes.
She's telling me I'm as good as a horse. You just hold for dog food, huh?
We are paying an army of 50 to 100,000 scientists who cannot even predict the spread of AIDS. That is the time to say, where's our market economy? Does that make sense? Is the patient getting its dollar's worth of treatment? The answer is clearly no.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is hopeful that the answer to this dreaded disease may be in sight.
I believe now that we have the agent in hand, that the amount of effort and energy that's being put into it by biomedical sciences, that within a reasonable period of time we'll have a lot of these answers.
Consider it an epidemic, yet you rarely hear a thing about it. At first, it seemed to strike only one segment of the population. Now, Barry Peterson tells us this is no longer the case.
And yet most of the country doesn't know about this cancer.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it's a gay cancer.
It appeared a year ago in New York's gay community, then in the gay communities in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Now it's been detected in Haitian refugees. No one knows why. And in heavy drug users, especially in New York City. No one knows why. And in some people with hemophilia, a disease that prevents blood clotting so the patient needs frequent blood transfusions. Why?
Proven, but some doctors suspect that blood banks and plasma centers may be spreading a new and mysterious ailment called AIDS. That is, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Over the last 2 years, about 1,000 Americans have been struck by the ailment, which destroys the body's ability to fight infection. 400 of the victims have died. How to combat it has produced a controversy in the medical community, but some blood banks are already changing procedures.
There is no hypothesis in biology that has been so unproductive, so unable to predict anything as the virus AIDS hypothesis. It is time to stand up and say, to call for alternatives. But it's difficult to do in our country because medical science is now a totalitarian field. It is entirely regulated. The money is entirely distributed from one institution, that's the National Institute of Health.
The role of NIH was further expanded by Roosevelt's signing of the Public Health Service Act in 1944. The National Institute of Health became the National Institutes of Health in 1948. Today, NIH encompasses 27 institutes and centers, each with a specific research agenda. It continues to be part of the Public Health Service, which in turn is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I remember it very, very clearly because it was associated with some major decisions I made about changing the direction of my career. I was sitting in my office at the NIH Clinical Center, the research hospital where I had my laboratories, and what came on my desk in June of 1981 was the June 5th edition of Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report, the weekly a summary that comes from the CDC. And it was a report of 5 otherwise healthy, interestingly and curiously, gay men who presented in Los Angeles with an unusual pneumonia called pneumocystis pneumonia, which is seen only in individuals who have a compromised body defenses or immune system.
And they have made up their minds before even one paper had been published on the subject in 1984, as we discussed half an hour ago, when Reagan was to be re-elected, and Gallo and Margaret Heckler announced the cause of AIDS had been found before one single study had been published.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, the probable cause of AIDS has been found, a variant of a known human cancer virus. Second, not only has the agent been identified, but a new process has been developed to mass produce this virus. Thirdly, with discovery of both the virus and this new process, we now have a blood test for AIDS. With the blood test, we can identify AIDS victims with essentially 100% certainty.
The papers that had subsequently been published by Gallo were since all shown to be fraudulent, fabricated material.
And then a year later, in May of 1984, Gallo showed the absolute connection between the virus and the disease. When Bob Gallo proved that it was the etiologic agent in 1984, we had a diagnostic test approved by the FDA in 1985. So the test was developed, it was gone through the appropriate validation and approved by the FDA. That was really quick, from literally less than a year from the time that it was shown to be the virus that causes this disease.
Man had just been elected chairman of his community's annual charity drive, and he went over all the records, and he noticed something that about one individual in town, a very wealthy man, and so he paid a call on him. He introduced himself as to what he was doing, and he said, "Our records show that you have never contributed anything to our charity." And the man said, "Well, do your records show that I also have a brother who was the result of a disabling accident, is permanently disabled and cannot provide for himself? Do your records show that I have an invalid mother and a widowed sister with several small children and no father to support them?" And the chairman, a little abashed and embarrassed, said, "Well, no, our records don't show that." The man said, "Well, I don't give anything to them. Why should I give something to you?" This fiscal year, the federal government plans to spend $317 million on AIDS research and $766 million overall. Next year, we intend to spend 30% more on research, $413 million out of $1 billion overall. Spending on AIDS has been one of the fastest growing parts of the budget. And ladies and gentlemen, it deserves to be.
Historically, we first recognized this disease actually as a new disease in 1981. The cases were first brought to the attention of the Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC, in 1979. In the summer of 1981, there were reports of unusual infections and or tumors in otherwise healthy homosexual men.
Excuse me. Am I being fired?
If you had lost confidence in me, why'd you give me the Highline suit?
Andy, you nearly blew the entire case, for Christ's sakes. That alone is inexcusable.
Uh-huh.
So you were concealing your illness?
That's correct. That's not the point. From the day they hired me to the day I was fired, I served my clients consistently, thoroughly, with absolute excellence. If they hadn't fired me, that's what I'd be doing today.
And they don't want to fire you for having AIDS, so in spite of your brilliance, they make you look incompetent, thus the mysterious lost file? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Correct. I was sabotaged.
I don't buy it, counselor.
Now again, if I were giving you this lecture when we started working on AIDS a few years ago, I would be spending the first 10 minutes or so trying to convince the audience that we were dealing with a new disease. In fact, we don't need to waste any time on that. This is a new disease, at least in the United States. Where it came from, we'll discuss in a short while. But in the United States, it's new. Because when you're dealing with a new syndrome like that, and you don't really understand it, anyone's hypothesis about what this might be is held in equal respect to a well-thought-out hypothesis. And I think that led to a lot of the misunderstanding, not only regarding AIDS in general, but regarding the entire homosexual population and how they may have been the early victims of this particular disease. And
excuse me? It's a great case. I saw you on television. I'm a law student at Penn.
Oh.
How you doing?
I'm right. How are you?
All right.
You saw me on TV.
Yeah. I'd like to have a drink with me. I just finished a game and I could use a beer, you know?
No, I can't. My wife.
I don't pick up people in drugstores every day.
You think I'm gay?
Aren't you?
What's the matter with you? Do I look gay to you?
Do I look gay to you? Joe, relax.
No, what do you mean relax? You know how to kick your faggoty little ass.
Take it as a compliment, jeez.
You know, that is exactly the kind of bullshit that makes people hate you, little faggot.
because when you're dealing with a new syndrome like that, and you don't really understand it, anyone's hypothesis about what this might be is held in equal respect to a well-thought-out hypothesis.
In a paper from Harvard, like 2 years ago, I was blamed by a former colleague, friend, Max Essex, as a mass murderer because I suggested or advised former President Mbeki of South Africa that HIV is not causing AIDS, and therefore we don't need to use condoms and not use antiviral drugs. We have a vaccine against AIDS. 25 years we have said that, and we have spent billions in it. Here's a vaccine. So here's an AIDS patient, he gets a vaccine, 3 weeks later he's fine. That would be the answer. I would be gone. If you have an effective vaccine, shut up. You know?
So, in spite of your brilliance, they make you look incompetent, thus the mysterious lost file? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Correct. I was sabotaged.
Or if AIDS spreads sexually in the general population like viruses do for 25 years, come on, how much longer should we wait? Where in the history of viruses and microbes have we ever seen those that only stay with a small minority of male homosexuals and junkies?
So that means they become ill because of their lifestyle, not the virus.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
He with the most honey attracts the most bees.
Yeah.
Lots of customers here, darling. A little smile will go a long way.
see old stuff, for example, like you mentioned before, with long hair and black fingernails?
Oh, when I see myself?
When you see yourself.
Oh dear, I want to tear them all up. I just think, I actually laugh at myself. But I know that it was something that you had to do. I think someone like Boy George, in about 5 or 10 years' time, is going to look and say, oh my God, did I really look like that? But he knows that it was relevant at the time, and it was right, and I think I don't regret any of the things I did. It's just that I laugh. I mean, what did you look like 10 years ago?
Horrible, yeah.
Do you look at your pictures and...
Yes.
Oh, there you are then.
And when we hear a guy like you saying that HIV doesn't cause AIDS, that's like, it's very confusing. No, for people who don't understand, your argument, I mean, in a paraphrasing sort of way, is that it's illicit drug use. It's like amyl nitrate and crystal meth, and that is what's destroying the immune systems of these people. And then HIV shows up because their immune system is diminished. Is that a fair assessment of it?
So HIV is a virus.
It's a virus. It's one of the most harmless type of viruses we know. That's why we only discovered them really well worked on them in the last 20, 30 years.
So how could it be possible that no one else believes this? That the scientific community sort of looks down on your assessment of this, and
So, in spite of your brilliance, they'd make you look incompetent, thus the mysterious lost file? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Correct. I was sabotaged.
That is, I think, much politics behind it. You see, the virus hunters, as we used to be called, or still called, those who were looking for viruses, doing something or another, their pride is to find something to get the viruses to do something terrible. If they do something bad, then they are important. You know what I mean? So if they're harmless, they're not so important. Saying, okay, you study your harmless viruses, tell me what else is happening. Yeah. So we tried that in the 60s and 50s. It was popular then, 70s. That viruses might cause cancer. You may have heard about this. Virus cancer program, virus cancer theory.
And yet most of the country doesn't know about this cancer.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it's a gay cancer.
Well, as an example, a human papillomavirus can turn into cervical cancer, right? I mean, you can catch a virus of one type, the theory goes, and then if left unchecked, it grows into cervical cancer, as an example, right? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what they claim. But what it really does, it makes a wart. It's why it's called papillomavirus. Papilloma is another word for a wart.
It's warts, so it's venereal warts.
And then they say, well, maybe 30 years later you get cancer. When they come in with a long latent period, you can already eat something.
Warts are the second most common skin problem humans face. Acne is number 1. Warts can occur anywhere on the skin, but commonly show up in hands, feet, faces, and the like. Warts are caused by the human papillomavirus. That's right, HPV. HPV is usually the name given to a sexually transmitted infection because it's the same virus. But you're not getting genital warts on your face, trust me, it's a different thing. Normally, warts will come and go. They're the result of HPV viruses.
A variant of a known human cancer virus.
And yet most of the country doesn't know about this cancer.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it's a gay cancer.
Because when you're dealing with a new syndrome like that and you don't really understand it, anyone's hypothesis about what this might be is held in equal respect to a well-thought-out hypothesis.
But what if everything that we think we know about AIDS actually isn't true?
Something's amiss. Something it doesn't add up. Viruses are not slow. They are not that complicated. They infect you now. All they want to do is replicate and reproduce their own. They don't wait 10 or 20 years for something to happen.
Every cell in your body is a tiny factory, constantly making proteins. Your genetic code, or DNA, directs every activity. Protein-making machinery in the cell reads the cell's own DNA and makes sure the cell proteins go where they're needed. Viruses have their own genetic code, but they don't have the machinery to copy their DNA. So viruses need your cell's machinery to reproduce themselves. A virus starts this process by using the keys on its surface to gain entry. Like a Trojan horse, it enters the cell. The virus releases its own DNA into the unsuspecting cell and hijacks the protein-making machinery. Now, this vital cell function becomes an assembly line
for new virus particles.
You look, and I watched a lot of people die in the 80s and the 90s in New York. And a number of them were gay, but...
Lots of them were gay. In
yes.
fact, that was the first... But still is the major.
Sure, but here's what was interesting is that most of them were dying from very similar symptoms. If you went there, in fact, the majority of AIDS, and you can correct me when I'm wrong here, but the majority of AIDS patients die of starvation. It's very difficult for them to hold food, to retain food. That was really, when you went to the wards, and I did, you'd see all these AIDS patients, and they were terribly skinny. And actually what happened was, yes, the virus would destroy your immune system, and you'd be exposed to, you'd get Kaposi sarcoma, which were the big, these rare skin cancers that only old people get, and all kinds of awful diseases. I mean, I watched people with these terrible rashes. They didn't know what they were.
You're not a doctor, are you?
I'm not a doctor at all.
Nurse,
I'm just an actor, man. I don't know. I know nothing.
It's good.
Oh yeah. Well, I've read a lot about it.
Because you said you went to awards. So
I've read a lot about it, and correct me, by the way, I'm a layman. You know, so when, but I was going to get to a question. It's not a point of view. It's a question. But one of the things that there was clearly in their bloodstream when you get tested for what they'd call HIV, they're not seeing the virus. What you get tested for and what shows up on your test is antibodies to the virus, right?
A very important point.
Right.
We started off with an antibody test. That's a very sensitive test. It's confirmed by what we call a Western blot test for diagnosis. It's very easy to do. Several generations later, we have tests that can be done literally in minutes. It could be done on saliva. It could be done on blood. But the molecular techniques to probe for the virus, PCR and a variety of other techniques that we now have, are widely used throughout the world. And they're very sensitive and very good tests for the virus.
You know, it's just as opposite as you could get a virus.
Yes.
An antibody against it. That is neutralizing and stopping and killing.
Exactly.
That is a vaccine. That is nature's and mankind's only protection against virus is a vaccine.
Antibodies. A vital weapon of the immune system. Antibodies are designed to fit and attach to specific invading molecules. By attaching to the cell's receptors, the toxin burns through cell after cell, attacking nerves that control breathing, heart rate, or kidney function. When antibodies arrive, everything changes. Instead of attaching to the cell's receptors, the toxin now binds with surrounding antibodies, blocking it from attaching to cells. But diphtheria antitoxin provides only temporary protection, because its antibodies will run out. This is called passive immunity. When the immune system makes its own antibodies, it's called active immunity, which is what a vaccine creates. Through a series of steps over many days, the immune system makes the needed antibodies, now forever ready to quickly deploy its weapons and prevent a future attack.
You know, it's just as opposite as you could get a virus.
Yes.
An antibody against it. That is neutralizing and stopping and killing.
Exactly.
That is a vaccine. That is nature's and mankind's only protection against virus is a vaccine.
There are a couple of aspects about HIV that are very unique and extremely frustrating with regard to the fact that you can't, not only can the body not spontaneously eradicate, you can't even eradicate it with drugs, even though you can effectively treat a person to the point of allowing them to lead a relatively normal life by suppressing the replication of the virus. But what the virus has is multiple characteristics. A, it mutates very rapidly. It's an RNA virus. It replicates at an enormous rate, and it mutates. So the body's immune system is constantly trying to catch up with it and essentially never does. It partially suppresses, but certainly never completely, with very few exceptions.
However, though, yes, the body mounts a defense with antibodies. What the theory, and I'll just add to this, what the theory was that what happens is it's such an onslaught on your immune system, the immune system eventually gives up and cannot produce enough antibodies, your immune system gets killed. Along comes David Ho with you, and I know you know the name.
Dr. Ho.
There are a lot of people that took protease inhibitors, and I know them, And by the way, when they were dying, they sold all their stuff because they were going to be gone in a month.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, protease inhibitors keep people alive. I mean, I've seen this. So the question becomes, if protease inhibitors, which by the way now used to have to take, as you know, a bunch of pills. Now it's down to 4 or 5 pills a day. There are a lot of people living with HIV that the argument goes, and at least from what I've seen, would have been dead and now are living very normal lives. How do you explain that?
First of all, let me say good after late afternoon. Because of the HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers today. I just want to make clear, first of all, that I do not have the AIDS disease, because I know a lot of you want to know that, but HIV virus. My wife is fine, she's negative, so no problem with her. I plan on going on, living for a long time, bugging you guys like I've always have.
The people who don't take these drugs, the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control say there are 35 million of them at least on this planet. Probably even more. They say 30% of the Africans are positive. In America we have 1 million. That million in American HIV positives was there in 85, is still here. Why didn't they die out?
Well, they did die though. A lot of people died.
Well,
in the
they say
80s.
we have still 1 million.
Like winning.
When was the last time you used?
I use a blender. I use a vacuum cleaner. I use household items. When was the last time I ingested or took drugs?
Yes. When was the last time you took drugs?
Such an AA stupid expression or term. I don't remember. I do not remember.
A week ago, 2 weeks ago,
Maybe a month
2 days
ago,
ago.
6 weeks. I don't know. It was a couple days before the suits rolled in and said, change everything. We're shutting you down.
Tell me about the last time you took drugs.
The last time I took drugs, I probably took more than anybody could survive.
What are we talking about? How much?
I don't know, man. I was banging 7-gram rocks and finishing them because that's how I roll. I have one speed. I have one gear. Go.
How do you survive that?
Because I'm me. I'm different. I just have a different constitution. I have a different brain. I have a different heart. I have a different, I get tiger blood, man.
Should we call Clay?
He's on the guns. Call the others. It's baseball time.
Great.
God, you're so stiff. You won't score in the second half.
Georgie!
Hey! Get the hell out! This is a close set!
Come here, How do you feel about Mark Wallace today, knowing that he did what he did? Because he actually faked his test and kept shooting once he knew he was HIV positive.
Yes, I mean, it's just completely unforgivable. It's unforgivable. It's on every level, because you're lying and potentially giving someone a death sentence. You're also putting this production company on the hook. I have a production company. If somebody can track something on my set, they go to OSHA and they want to try to sue me. There's loopholes everywhere. Now I'm responsible because I was the one conducting the shoot. It ends up on a lot of people's backs. And when you take a decision that's just yours and you hand it to so many people and let it disrupt their life, that's just unforgivable.
It's a legitimate business, Clay. We run it clean. Feds think we turned over a new leaf, they go away.
And at the very least, we'll get Bobby laid.
Thoughts?
Everybody loves pussy. I second that.
Third it. I'm a very big fan of pussy.
All in favor? Like I gotta ask.
Pussy!
All right. It's like we're making movies. We got a delivery to make.
So I don't know. But there's not really too many downfalls. I mean, we get tested every month, and if you don't come out with a clean test, then you don't work. So that's one thing. I also have that security blanket when I work, is I know I'm gonna be safe, I know I'm gonna be taken care of, and I know I'm not gonna be disrespected. Because at any point in time I feel that way, the shoot stops, and I get paid still. So I never have to feel like something bad's going to happen.
So there's a lot of protections in place.
Correct. There's a lot of protection in place for the girls.
Yeah. How come you're attracted to me and not Charlie Sheen? Is he still after you?
Yeah, actually he is.
Charlie is still after you?
Yeah, he sent some adult actor into Wicked, and
Wicked is the company you work for?
yes, trying to get my number because I moved and I
Right.
changed my number. So he was trying to get my number, and Joy was like, "Listen, she's not interested, but here's the autographed picture."
Really? So in other words, so Charlie, you've never met Charlie, or you have?
I've never met him in person. I've talked to him on the phone,
Right.
but that's all.
And that's all.
So
and you will not be with him.
No. Well, if I was going to, I would have by now.
Right.
You know.
I
so-
see. You would have acted on it.
Yeah.
And you are simply not into him because he is with too many different women?
Yeah, he's a porn groupie.
He is. I see. And what about this? I've been reading in the paper that you had sex with the guy from Friends, Matt LeBlanc. Is it Matt LeBlanc is the one they say you had
Matt
sex?
LeBlanc.
Matt LeBlanc. Excuse me, Matt LeBlanc. Because
No,
did you have sex with him or not?
No.
Have to, yeah. I'm here to admit that I am in fact HIV positive. Yeah, it started with what I thought based on this series of cluster headaches and insane migraines and sweating the bed, completely drenched, 2-3 nights in a row that I was emergency hospitalized. I thought I had brain tumor. I thought it was over. After a battery of tests and spinal taps, all that crap, they walked in the room and said, "Boom, here's what's going on." It's a hard 3 letters to absorb, you know. It's a turning point in one's life.
4 years you have been trying to keep this secret.
Yeah.
And you have said that you have been the victim of betrayal and extortion. You told me that a lot of people have actually demanded money to stay silent about this.
That is true. Yeah, and I have paid those people. Not that many, but enough to where it is depleted the future.
How many people have you paid?
I don't want to guess wrong, but enough to bring it into the millions. And that's what people forget is that's money they're taking from my children. You know, they think it's just me, but I got 5 kids and a granddaughter. You know.
You wrote this.
We're talking about shakedowns. Yeah.
McCarthy spoke out on her Sirius XM radio show.
In the acting world, before we do a job, we have to sign a piece of paper that says, do you have cold sores? You have to sign a release that says, yes, I have cold sores. I need to show the medication. So for years, as I sit here with one on my face, for years, I've signed this piece of paper. I'm like, wait a second. If I have to be upfront about a herpes, how could you not be upfront about HIV?
For sure, but I mean, this is all cocaine party thinking. Yeah. I mean, everyone's just having terrible judgment.
Yeah, I imagine there was quite a bit of naughty behavior in the Sheen residence.
I mean, the guy was doing tremendous amounts of blow.
Yeah.
Like, they would talk about him doing blow that would kill a normal-sized person.
I think Charlie is claiming, and again, I haven't heard the interview, that he told everyone in his life who he slept with and stuff that he had HIV. When did you learn that he had HIV?
Right along with everyone else. He never said anything to me. I was his girlfriend. I lived with him.
Right.
We were together. We had sex almost every day for a year.
Unprotected sex?
With lambskin condoms, which
Which
is not productive.
Yeah.
No.
Only pregnancy.
You
like winning.
A variant of a known human cancer virus.
And yet most of the country doesn't know about this cancer.
Why?
Well, I think it's because it's a gay cancer.
Because when you're dealing with a new syndrome like that and you don't really understand it, anyone's hypothesis about what this might be is held in equal respect to a well-thought-out hypothesis.
But what if everything that we think we know about AIDS actually isn't true?
Charlie traveled to Mexico searching for an experimental treatment from a doctor I've never heard of until Charlie told me about him. His name is Dr. Sam Chachoa, and he claims to know how to cure HIV and AIDS. We went looking for information on Dr. Sam Chachoa on the internet and found a controversial and mysterious figure. He claims to know how to cure cancer and AIDS, but we couldn't track down much more on Dr. Chachoa than a couple of videos on YouTube. So you went to Mexico.
I did.
To visit with Dr. Chachoa.
I did, yeah.
What's the treatment? What's being done?
It was a series of injections and then blood work. And again, we did see some incredible results early on.
Explain what you saw that was encouraging.
That off of the med cocktail, that I was undetectable.
HIV titers were not detectable.
Yeah. And it stayed that way. I did an experiment that was I didn't have any faith in, but I went along with it. Two dear friends that you know, they withdrew their blood. I withdrew some of mine, and I added mine to their test tubes. The blood was then incubated, cultured for 4 days, and when the results came back, all three were undetectable. So I actually sat and observed this stuff. You know, that actually happened. And if you'd seen something like that, wouldn't you have thought, okay, there might be something here?
Moment in my life.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Because the first thing you think about is like, how did it happen? Where did it happen? And you start going back through your mind, like, who was involved? What was the thing? And most people that are positive can't they can't pinpoint that exact moment. They can't do it. And I'm one of them. You know, I thought I was dying when I went to the hospital, you know, the spinal tap and the thing, and then it was revealed. And then, you know, it was kind of like, it was a quiet moment. It was like, I had to just sit with it for a second. Looked over at Mom, and she was like, you know, you've gotten through harder times. I'm like, are you sure? So, but no, but then a lot of people do go to the hospital and don't come home.
There's no respect. There's no boundaries no more. I feel like we're in Sodom and Gomorrah right now. It's just sex, drugs, killing, whoever, you know, made the best girl or guy stand up, you know, like come on. I feel like I'm in a gladiator movie right now.
I came out here selling crystal, angel dust. Angel dust went to me using crystal. From crystal, I went snorting coke. In and out county jail for some time. I'm 54 now. If you just tested HIV positive, don't give up. There's 1/3 people that's a carrier. Like me, I've been infected, don't know how. So I tested HIV positive, I'm a carrier. I'm losing weight. HIV carrier has to eat twice as much as a person that's healthy to keep our immune system up and fighting. A lot of people don't tell you that. You see, this is one of the messages at ACE I want to give you young people out there. We can beat this COVID-19. We can beat HIV.
Okay. About 1.1 million people were living with HIV at the end of 2010. About 16% of those people didn't know they had it.
Right.
1 in 5 are unaware of their infection. Mm-hmm. Men who have sex with men account for most new and existing HIV infections among men. Mm-hmm. Black men have the highest rates of new HIV infections among all men. Right. Have we made any strides since you made your announcement?
Well, so we definitely made some strides. So I know those numbers are still devastating, but we made some strides because, first of all, let's go from the medical side of it. One drug, when I announced 22 years ago, now we have over 30. So with early detection, that's why it's important to go get tested, because I'm only here because of early detection. We jumped on it right away. I got on some meds. The meds have been working. I've been making sure I've taken my meds. And so what we find out over the course of 22 years is that we have a fear of going to the doctor. Okay. Or we have a fear of needles, like me. I don't like needles, man. I be looking away when the doctor I can't even look at a needle. I might faint. So
he means the number's the same. It hasn't risen.
Any million Americans, yes, they would be 30 years later, it wouldn't be the same million, but they would be replaced in part.
Well, isn't that because people were catching it more and more? I mean, in other words,
they had it already. In 85, when it was detected, was measured, 1 million were positive. Now still a million are positive. And of the 30 or 40 million who never get drugs, they live exactly like they did before. Take Africa. Africa, they said 30% are positive. And the continent would die out, remember that? Mm-hmm. Guess what happened? It was 400 or 500 million Africans in the 80s, end of the 80s, when they first detected it there. Guess how many we have now? Black Africans.
I don't know.
1 billion. Mm. Still 1/3 of them are HIV positive. They almost tripled. That is the largest population explosion in the recorded history of mankind.
The battle against HIV has had a lot of successes. It's amazing that the drug therapy is working so well. The drug prices have come down dramatically. The generosity of the foreign donors has meant that those drugs are available. And over 5 million people are alive today that wouldn't have been without that generosity. But we can't let that success cause us to lose focus. There's a lot of people still living with HIV, and the risk is that the next generation will actually have more cases of HIV than the current generation. Today, over half the people who have HIV worldwide don't know they're infected. And we need to make it easy for those people to get tested. We have to invest in breakthrough tools like a vaccine. The science is fantastic, but it takes a long time to trial those, refine them, get them approved. Another tool is prevention. That includes using condoms, voluntary male circumcision, and taking the daily drugs we call PrEP. But those things have not had the degree of adoption that we would have hoped for.
Guess how many we have now? Black Africans.
I don't know.
1 billion. Mm. Still 1/3 of them are HIV positive. They almost tripled. That is the largest population explosion in the recorded history of mankind. Despite HIV in a third of them, they should have all died away. That's what they still say in the New York Times or in the journals. They don't want to hear about it, that you say they're doubling and tripling. You see it if you look for population stats. It's not the same article. Occasionally they make a little note.
So protease inhibitors do not work, or they are a fake drug, or
what do they do that's positive that's helping these people improve their health condition?
I don't think anything.
Nothing.
No, possibly it gets them into a new lifestyle.
Attachment inhibitors represent a novel class of antiretroviral drug. They prevent the initial interaction between the virus and host cell, blocking subsequent viral entry into the cell. The attachment inhibitor binds to the outer domain of HIV-1 GP120 on the viral envelope, just underneath the region for CD4 binding. As GP120 is not able to bind to the CD4 cell, subsequent viral entry is blocked. In summary, attachment inhibitors prevent the first step of viral cell entry, attachment to the CD4 cell membrane.
So protease inhibitors do not work, or they are a fake drug, or
what do they do that's positive that's helping these people improve their health condition?
I don't think anything.
Nothing.
No, possibly it gets them into a new lifestyle. I think you don't feel like having 10 dates or 5 dates when you're on protease inhibitors. Many of them show up and feel ill. So I don't know how it balances off.
But what about the notion?
But if you look at some of the pictures, now they admit it in the San Francisco Chronicle, they age very quickly. They have liver disease, they have heart disease, kidney disease.
A lot of side effects.
Oh, well.
Very toxic side effects.
Side effects is a euphemism.
Yeah.
That's the only effect it has. HIV positive, no drugs. Anything you want to do is fine.
But we have to go back to it for a second. The fact remains that when the 80s and 90s, I knew a lot of people, a lot of gay men, who were dying, and I watched them die very specifically. They were dying with blue splotches. They were dying because they couldn't hold down the food. They were dying very slow. Pneumonia, a great deal of pneumonia. I watched this. We all saw it. And what happened was all of us said, wait a minute. This is something crazy is going on here. Mm. You could see it. It was just droves of walking dead in New York. It was such a tragic thing. You don't see that anymore in the gay community. And all of them that I know are taking these drugs that seem to be wonder drugs because what they've done is kept people alive and healthy and muscular and vibrant. You just don't, in the gay community, the AIDS, HIV is no longer a death sentence. In fact, HIV isn't even something they talk about as much. And so the fact remains that you don't have an epidemic of death in the gay community as you did in 85, 91, 92, and until David Ho came along with protease inhibitors. So there's something happened there. Something had to have happened there. I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, you don't see people with Kaposi sarcoma. Hospital wards are not full of people who can't hold food down and dying of pneumonia, who are HIV positive, right? So how do we explain that?
Well, it
difference?
was, at least according to the records that I found, and they write up yourself, Michael Callan, for example, you may know that name.
Sure. That's my dad's name, but it's a different Michael Callan.
He had, it says, 1,500 AIDS, and with 2 or 3 or 4 nights sometimes, with nitrite inhalants and amphetamines and cocaine and all of these drugs. Yeah, well, you can, if you burn the candle on so many ends, he was gone 5 or 10 years later. That's what get him sick. Now, at least many of them know, or at least suspect, that nitrite inhalants, the poppers, causing Kaposi and wearing them out, that is somewhat known.
The muscle relaxant properties of amyl are fantastic for butt stuff. I've got a tattoo of it on my chest as a homage to my community because I know that it brings people together. There's no real reason to be banning this. The poppers of amyl. So the brand here is Double Scorpio. It's out of the States, and this is a peppermint and eucalyptus blend. Just unscrew it and have a whiff. Here in Australia, it's called amyl because it's based off the chemical compound, amyl nitrate. But in North America and in Europe, they're called poppers, marketed as a VHS head cleaner, a leather cleaner, or a room odorizer. It's a muscle relaxant, it dilates your blood vessels, and it gives you a beautiful, lovely, smooth high for 30 seconds.
So poppers are what cause Kaposi sarcoma?
Very many, a number of studies have directly shown the correlation. It's a carcinogen. It's a nitrite. It's an alkylating agent that goes through the blood and causes essentially it's a skin and blood cancer.
Brian, were your friends drug users?
No, not all of them. I mean,
the ones who had AIDS?
No, a lot of them were just theater guys. In fact, a lot of them were theater guys who were just gay. There are a lot of examples of people who were not drug users. I mean, my God, there are a lot of children that died of AIDS because they got it from their parents or from blood transfusions.
No. And very, very few. Very few.
Well, in the 80s, there were,
all of them were kids of junkie mothers who were prostitutes and junkies.
The question of AZT. Now, AZT is what they gave them initially. That was what they gave them when they first started.
87.
Now, AZT, correct me if I'm wrong, was a cancer medication that was deemed to be too dangerous. They used it for chemotherapy, and they stopped using it because it was killing people.
Cocaine, alcohol, methamphetamine, AZT. I call a recipe for disaster. Texas shithole, doc. Said I was a doctor. Revoked my license to practice 3 years ago. That's why I'm down in this shithole. How do you do? Yeah. Now these drugs you're doing, they're breaking down your immune system, making you susceptible to infection. You're saying cocaine is scaring your mind? No, I'm saying cocaine made you more susceptible, as did the AZT. AZT is what's happening. The only people AZT helps are the people who sell it. It kills every cell it comes in contact with. I'm going to prescribe a regimen of vitamins, as well as mineral zinc, to build up your immune system. And you're supposed to be taking aloe and essential fatty acids. Sound fun?
Quicker than the cancer.
They still use it somewhat also for chemotherapy. It's not different from any other chemotherapy.
But it's a very, very brutal one.
They're all brutal.
They're all brutal.
They're designed to be brutal. They're designed to kill human cells.
Yeah, and because it's a retrovirus, and a retrovirus copies.
Human cells. Chemotherapy, cancer drugs are designed to kill human cells. And that's what they give them. They give them less and less, so they die.
Well, AZT.
Mr. Woodruff. Dr. Steve Howard. I bet you're surprised to see me.
Well, you nearly killed yourself, so we need to know where you acquired the drugs.
Well, I need to know just exactly what you're pumping in my bloodstream here, Doc.
All right. This is a combination of AZT, and we also got a full spectrum. Don't.
I'm suing you for attempted murder. Where's my stuff, Barkley?
Your stuff gave you a heart attack.
Go to hell. I say what goes in my body, not you.
That decision, like it or not, is left up to the people in this hospital.
What, you think I'm one of your goddamn guinea pigs, Savard, huh? I look like a rodent to you.
Mr. Woodruff.
But they kill the liver and they screw up your metabolism.
I see.
They are not quite as toxic directly as ACT or the DNA chain terminators.
Okay.
But now all of the antiviral treatments are cocktails of DNA chain terminators and protease inhibitors. So you get it many ways.
So, doctor, if somebody had HIV...
And guess what the people who take those eventually die from? And it's not so rare. They die 10, 20 years later. The dose is so that they won't die immediately. I think that would be bad even for the pharma companies.
Sure. But isn't that better than, isn't dying 20 years later better than dying 6 months later as HIV did?
That would be better, but was not HIV. There are millions with HIV who have nothing. They're exploding in Africa, the population. There are 1 million Americans, they're still around. 500,000 Europeans, still around. No treatment. That's the only way to go ahead.
Most Americans that are HIV positive, I believe, are getting treatment here. I mean, the ones that I know. I know only 3, but I know they're getting that. That's not a lot, but I do know 3 people are HIV positive. One is a woman in her 60s.
And they will be in that group. They will get... Guess what they usually die from, these guys, long-term treatment?
Toxicity, probably, right?
Well, they die from pneumonia, from lung disease, kidney disease, and heart disease. And then they get dementia, they get a chemo brain. If you have these chain terminators working in your mitochondria, you become more and more senile very early. It is described now in the San Francisco Chronicle just a week ago. They have this AIDS Institute there. They, for the first time, let it so. Maybe it's the drugs too.
There's a disconnect, right? There's something wrong. If they were dying by the droves and all of a sudden they got on these protease inhibitors and the whole community became healthy. So you're saying it was like a placebo effect for the entire community, or the whole community changed its approach to life? Is that what happened?
I think the drug use, the recreational drug use, went down somewhat. I don't know where it's now, but it was word of mouth that this was probably part of the problem. I mean, Michael Callan, these guys write it themselves. They say this lifestyle is untenable.
It's unquestionable. I mean, there's no question that it is a part of the problem. Everybody who does like hardcore drugs like that, it fucks your body up.
Well, not only that, though, hardcore drugs also create promiscuity. When you're doing meth, you're fucking, and you're a guy with other guys.
What are you doing?
Huh?
What's going on?
Nothing, I'm just saying.
Sex is nothing new. Sex is 3 billion years old. You can
So what happened to these people? There's got to be an explanation. These people are sick. They take the protease inhibitors. They're healthy. They live. But you're saying protease inhibitors actually are toxic and very bad for the body.
And they take the cocktails usually.
Right.
The typical recipient takes 2 chain terminators and protease inhibitors.
Right. So how are they getting better?
They don't get better. Where's the evidence that they get better? Okay. They don't get worse as much as they did before, as fast as they did before. I don't know. They acknowledge that they never cured anybody with these drugs. Never any cure.
Where was the eureka moment for you?
Well, as soon as I saw the papers from Gallo published, I knew that was politics, not science.
Well, Gallo was painted as a really nefarious character in a couple of things I've seen.
Pretty good. But I mean, the evidence was already in there. All he found was antibodies, not virus.
Yeah, for you guys, Gallo was the scientist at NIH, correct me if I'm wrong, the scientist at NIH who actually isolated what you would call the AIDS virus.
So anyway, that virus was not to be found. He had a hell of a time finding it. You may remember the so-called scandal that he didn't find it.
Yeah,
So
he took credit for it when
so
the French actually were
he
the
got
ones
it
that
from French.
isolated it.
So
yeah.
if you have a virus with a high load and killing people, all you need is pick a needle and you have the virus. Viruses can only hurt you if they are biochemically active, kill their cells and are there in large numbers. When they are latent, neutralized by antibody, no action, nothing happens biochemically. That was my starting point. That is the situation after you neutralize a virus. If that were a cause of disease, all of us vaccinated to polio would limp around and have
Well, no, because
paralyzed legs.
polio is a dead virus, right?
No, they're all the same. They're all dead until they get to a cell.
Right.
So, dead neutralized viruses, we all have herpes, we all have measles, we have mumps, we have often hepatitis. Once it's over, it's over. And we have a perfect one against HIV. That's what the AIDS test measures. There's antibody, no virus. Exactly because it works so well. That's why Gallo, the nation's leading AIDS researcher, had to steal it from France because he couldn't get it out of people who had antibody against the virus. But they don't ask those basic questions. That's propaganda.
But we did have an epidemic. I mean, we did have an AIDS epidemic. I remember.
I think
people
he's
dying.
saying that it coincides with drug epidemics.
But people are still.
Well, you
doing
remember
drugs.
the crack epidemic, man? You remember this very distinct thing that happened when crack was introduced? Yeah, we've had epidemics.
Yeah, but the whole use, the large-scale use of recreational drugs wasn't known in America until after Vietnam. Then they came back somewhat more open to the rest of the world as before, familiarized with drugs from Vietnam and disillusioned by, quote, losing the war, whatever it was. And then all of a sudden the drug epidemic picked up. The Beatles did it, the Yellow Submarine did it, everybody liked it.
But
Hold on.
Yeah, and that was the price for it. It was coming in the 70s and in the 80s, and all of a sudden we have AIDS. It's all drug related.
Is there a similarity to you between what your research with cancer and with AIDS?
Yeah, sure it is. It came from the same starting point. When I mentioned briefly when I first came, the hot thing in cancer research was to find cancer viruses. The retroviruses were the top of the,
Sure. Cancer was a retrovirus. I remember reading that.
Yeah, the retrovirus was the most popular because it wasn't killing cells. Unlike most viruses, like polio and flu and measles and mumps.
It kills the cell. These replicate cells.
They kill the cell and replicate in a dying cell and then kill more. But retroviruses have a strategy. They essentially move into it like your in-laws would move into your house, and they stay part of the cell, and essentially attacks it a little
from the
bit,
inside,
but very little. They don't do much. And then they're neutralized by antibody. You cannot even find them anymore.
What kills you with cancer then?
Well, cancer is a very serious, different business. There you have one cell, not thousands or millions infected, one that changes its chromosome. That is possibly a result of a carcinogen or some accident. And normally we have 46. All of our cells 46, and then they behave well, the programs work well, and the controls work well. In 3 billion years of tuning up of life, that worked pretty well. Now you change one around and make a new species, and it screws up all of these controls. It's a very different cell. A typical breast or colon or lung cancer has 60, 70, 80 chromosomes in it, instead of 46. All controls are off, all.
Do you believe in chemotherapy?
Yeah, yes, but there you have side effects. That's a good word for side effects. It attacks the cancer, but for sure it attacks you too, because there's no chemotherapy that can tell the DNA of a species or from a cancer cell that just came out of your own
can't distinguish.
DNA. Cannot distinguish.
Today, millions of people are receiving antiretroviral medicines to treat HIV infections. But due to various challenges, not everyone is taking their medication regularly. This is causing the HIV virus to become resistant to the most effective and affordable medicines. As a consequence, the virus stops responding to existing treatment. HIV drug resistance threatens the world meeting the 1990 targets to ensure that 90% of people receiving HIV treatment achieve suppression of the virus in their blood by 2020.
WHO is issuing a three-part package to guide global action to address resistance. A new global report summarizing current knowledge about resistance levels in countries, a new guideline recommending specific actions to respond to high-level resistance, and a 5-year global action plan to engage all stakeholders and encourage collective actions to prevent, monitor, and respond to HIV drug resistance.
This includes 5 areas for joint action by global partners: improving prevention and response, ensuring monitoring and surveillance, supporting research and innovation, strengthening laboratory capacity, and reinforcing governance and enabling mechanisms. We must act now to improve quality in the delivery of HIV treatment. This, combined with the introduction of new, safe, and effective medicines, can help us curb HIV drug resistance and achieve the global targets to end AIDS and save lives.
Take one.
Is it hard for you to say those words, "We're trying to cure cancer"?
That's a really good question, why it's hard to say we want to cure cancer. We do. And I think sometimes it's hard actually to think that you might actually succeed.
Patients that we're treating on this clinical trial have absolutely no other options left for them. These are patients who are unfortunately destined to die of their disease and in a fairly short amount of time.
Emily Whitehead, 554.
So Emma is incredibly matter-of-fact about all of this stuff. This was a child who had had her leukemia come back twice. The parents were looking for a miracle.
What we've learned how to do is train the immune system to recognize and then kill tumor cells.
It's a procedure where we collect their T cells, and they are infected with a virus that will genetically change them so that they will now see and react against their leukemia cells.
And we actually use the HIV virus to do that.
So you're taking the HIV virus and infecting healthy cells with it to help kill cancer?
Yes. The virus has been engineered so that it can't cause disease anymore. But it still retains the ability to reprogram the immune system so that it will now attack cancer cells. We call those modified immune cells serial killer cells. Each infused cell can kill more than 1,000 different tumor cells.
But the reality is the dramatic responses of cancer to new treatments are very unusual. We need to make it clear when we talk to a family that it may not work. Emma was given her T-cell treatment, and within a few days, she was very sick. She had breathing difficulties, she had blood pressure difficulties. We knew that she could not have gotten any sicker without actually dying.
But then a remarkable thing happened. The T cells were growing, they were starting to fight the cancer.
Within hours, Emma's fever disappeared.
It was like the calm after the storm. The clouds went away, and she woke up and there was no leukemia. When that child survived, it was, of course, an amazing event.
A common technique in genetic engineering is to insert a new gene into a loop of bacterial DNA called a plasmid. The enzyme has a precise shape that allows it to run along the groove of the double helix, scanning, in the case of ECOR1, for the base letter sequence GAATTC. The enzyme then cuts the plasmid at this specific point, allowing a new piece of DNA to be inserted. When it cuts, ECOR1 leaves a sticky end. This helps the new gene to attach. The joins are then stitched together by another enzyme called DNA ligase. Very quickly, large numbers of the bacteria can be produced, each with a copy of the inserted gene.
In gene therapy, a functional copy of the gene is delivered into a patient's own cells. Gene therapy uses engineered viruses to deliver genes into cells. These are called viral vectors. Vectors made from adeno-associated virus, or AAV. In gene therapy, the two native AAV genes are removed and replaced with DNA that contains a functional gene with instructions to produce a normal protein.
Here's tonight's backstory. A little girl who was dying of leukemia is now healthy and has no signs of the disease after a groundbreaking treatment that could change everything we know about the fight against cancer. In 2012, Emily Whitehead, just 6 years old at the time, battled an advanced form of leukemia. After she was out of options, after a 2-year battle, doctors told her family it was time to prepare for the worst. But in a life-saving turn, the family took part in a cutting-edge medical trial. HIV virus to reprogram the immune system to kill cancer cells. It is astonishing. 5 years later, she has been told, and her dad has been told, she has no cancer. It's gone. She's cured. She and her family are joining the fight for FDA approval of T-cell immunotherapy, testifying before the agency to advocate for what they call a miracle cure. Joining me now, Emily Whitehead and her dad.
Well, they took Emily's T-cells out of her body and used the HIV in the lab only to train her immune system. And then when they put them back in her, her cells were able to recognize and then kill her cancer.
Which is great. What do you tell other kids who are going through what you have gone through? How do you give them some hope?
Well, I always tell them to always keep fighting and never give up and always keep believing.
And that's
no expression, hide my head, I wanna drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. And I find it kinda funny, I find it kinda sad. The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had. I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take. When people run in circles, it's a very, very mad world. Mad world. Large and open.